Welcome everyone to This Week in Svelte, episode 104. And today we have a showcase, which I'm very excited about. In general, I'm always excited about showcases, but this will also be a very important one because it's Skeleton. Skeleton is a pretty big library, in general, but it's also a pretty big library in the Svelte ecosystem. And we also got to hang out with Chris in Barcelona, so I'm pretty excited to have him back here so that he can showcase brand new release 3.0 of Skeleton. Actually, we tried to do this before Summit, but I was too busy, so unfortunately we were not able to do it before Summit. But now we are here, so let's actually jump right into it because we have a big changelog. You can see how much I'm zoomed in because this week we actually released a bunch of stuff. So let's go over everything and we can figure it out. Type. So as you this is just about types. So basically you could already use a falsy attachment. So if you do @attach and the value is falsy, it's absolutely fine. It will just not do anything. But type-wise, so TypeScript was not happy about it, and with this change, it is. Handle more hydration mismatches is just a matter of, as you may know, hydration mismatches is basically if the browser thinks of if Svelte thinks that the Svelte rendered component has a certain shape, and for whatever reason the browser changes place, maybe removes. I think this specifically was about there are some extensions that remove some comments, and if you remove that comments, Svelte will basically lost track of what is what, and it will be an iteration error. And basically, this was just failing before, and now it's actually throwing a proper error, so you can actually spot it. We have 5.31.0, and this is kind of a cool one, especially for TypeScript users. So again, TypeScript, but basically now you can actually we allow state fields to be declared inside class constructor. So let me actually show you. If I go to the playground, basically the whole thing is, let's say that you have a class test, for example. Before, you had to declare state inside as a property. So before, you actually had to do something stuff is equal to $state 0. However, this is kind of problematic for TypeScript because let's say that you want to do constructor, you want to pass an initial value to the class this, and you want to use this initial value as state. So what you would do is something like this dot stuff is equal to initial value, which is fine, but also not, in the sense that, in this case, why would you initialize this to 0 if you know that it will never be 0? It will just be the initial value. So you could do something like this, but then TypeScript will be mad at you because, you're basically saying that this is a number, for example. The playground window is not visible? What? Sorry. Let me try to do this and this again. What is going on? Let me do this. Oh, no. Honestly, I have no idea why it was not working, but now you should be able to see it. And if I switch back, yeah, you should be. I don't know why. It probably froze at one point and I didn't realize. But so what I was saying is you have class test and you had to declare it like this, basically. Okay, so now it is visible. Okay, perfect. So basically you had to do something like this. And so like either you start with 0, but if you start with 0, like what's the point? Because you know that this will never be actually 0. It will always be initial value. Or you had to do something like this, but then you have a typing problem, because this means that like maybe you want this to be a number, but since $state actually returns undefined in this case, TypeScript will be mad at you for this kind of stuff. So what you could do instead, you can do stuff like this now. So instead of doing this, you can just do $state here, and this will be stateful. So like before, I don't even remember if you could do this before. I think maybe not. I think in a class you could only do this. But most importantly, like for state, maybe you could even do it. But most importantly, you can also do this for derived. So if you have something like this, you can also do this dot der state is equal to $derived, this dot state times 2, for example. Maybe. What is happening? Oh, yes, their stuff, not their state. Their stuff, and this dot state times 2. Oh, it's stuff. Why I'm doing this? Okay. So you basically can do something like this, and this will actually work. So let's say that let's actually try it. So if we do const t is equal new test 0, actually 1, and then we can do button on click, and we do t dot stuff. I would say, yeah, let's add ink, and does this dot stuff plus plus. If we do t dot ink like this, and we show, yeah, I need to not make this private, otherwise we will not be able to see it. So if I do this, and if I do t dot their stuff, now this is actually working. So before this was not possible, now you actually can do stuff like this, which means that it's absolutely fine. Like it's better to do it like when you need to have access to the initial value here and the derived here. It's much better to be able to do something like this. So yeah, let's go back to the changelog. Add missing attached tag in tag union inside type inside AST namespace for Svelte compiler. So again, this is just TypeScript stuff. We added the attached tag, which is a new tag, but the tag union type inside the AST namespace was not exporting that, and so this was actually opened by Xiho, which is one like the maintainer of Svelte print, which is a utility, like a library to print your Svelte AST, and so like you can see why he needed that. Avoid auto parentheses for special keywords only media query. So this is something that we made a mistake. When we shipped media query, we thought, well, like since you will probably just always use parentheses for media query, why not like not require to use a parenthesis? And so initially when we released media query from Svelte reactivity, so if you didn't know, like you can actually import media query from Svelte reactivity. And when you have this, what you can do is const, I don't know, small is equal to new media query, and let's say min width is, I don't know, 400 pixel, right? So if you do something like this and you show small dot current, you can see that like it's true when like the width is less than 400 pixel, and when you switch to bigger than 400 pixel, Sorry, it's the opposite. So it's false when it's less than 400 pixel, and after 400 pixel, it's switched to true. And as you can see, like by default, a media query like this will need to be parenthesized. But we naively told, yeah, like, I mean, if you need to always include the parentheses, we can just add them for you. And it was a mistake, because the first bug that we encountered is, let's say that you have something like min width, comma, I don't know, something else, like, or let's say that you want to use the parentheses. I can't remember the first bug. Oh yeah, I think it was like one media query could be something like media and midwidth 400 pixel. So this is like, it's something that you might use media only, and this, I can't remember how I can't remember the media query syntax, because generally I always use it's screen only, screen and 400 pixel maybe. Yeah, okay, screen and 400 pixel. So you can do something like this. And obviously, if you did something like this initially, and we added a couple of parentheses around it, it would have been problematic, because obviously, like, this will not work. Like, this needs to be outside of parentheses. And so we fixed it by like using a regex, and if you are already using parentheses in your media query, we will not add the parentheses. But this is actually a valid media query, screen. So in this case, you are not using parentheses, and this does not need to be inside parentheses. And so it was bugging, and now we fixed it. And the way we fixed it is a bit weird. So we would probably like fix this in Svelte 6 by removing the auto parentization altogether. But basically, like, since you can only have a set of word that doesn't need to be in parentheses, we basically check that every single word inside the media query is one of those, and if that's the case, then we know that it's just we don't need to parenthesize it. And so, yeah, we fixed it, but it's a mistake. Let's go to 5.32.0. Warn on implicitly closed tags. So this is a very nice feature that I think Sevenik or Ocean contributed. They are doing a lot of work nowadays, so like shout out to them. Yeah, Sevenik, which is pretty cool, because like I don't know if you are aware of, but if you have something like a p tag and you try to open a new p tag inside the p tag, the browser will automatically close the old p tag and then open the new one, and that's problematic, and you don't want to do that. And so now, if you do something like this, you should be getting a warning, or maybe it's like for div. I can't remember how to. Yeah, okay. I think that's an actual error, not a warning. Maybe. Oh, like this. Yeah. This element is implicitly closed by the following p, which can cause unexpected DOM structure. Add an explicit p to avoid surprises. So if you have something like this, technically this is actually like valuable code. Like you can actually write like first p and second p. Like as you can see, like this is basically implicit, like it's automatically closed by this p. So when you do something like this, the browser is actually doing this. So what Sevenik did is, let's warn when this p is actually automatically closing. So it's better. We also have attachment from action utility, and I'm pretty proud because this is I think it's my first export that I contributed to Svelte. So And it's nice. I think like I got the idea, and I think it's a nice addition, because basically now you can do something like attachments, and you can get from action. And so how is this useful? This is useful if you want to, like, let's say that you have a library that it's using actions, like MeltUI, for example, but you want the niceties of attachment. For example, the ability to spread them into a component. So if you do button.svelte, and you have script, let props is equal to $props, like this, and let's say that you have a button and you are spreading in all the props. And let's say that we are also at render props.children, like this. So we have this button component, which is a dump component, and we want to import button from button.svelte. Now, when you use the button, currently there is no way, currently there is no way to spread an action in. So if a library is using function, like, I don't know, melt action. So let's say that like melt is using an action that takes a node and return an update function. Let's say that is also taking, I don't know, an ID, for example, as input. And so it's doing console.log ID, it's an ID, and then it's doing node.add event listener, click, and it's on click logging, let's say that it's logging console.log ID, for example, and let's say that it's doing actually let ID is equal to ID, and on update you get a new ID, and you do ID is equal to new ID, so that you can always update it. And obviously on destroy, it's gonna remove the event listener. So we can actually use const controller is equal to new abort controller. This is my favorite way of removing an event listener. If you didn't know, you can pass a signal as the third argument, signal controller.signal. You can pass a signal to the third argument of an event listener, and when you do controller.abort, it will remove the event listener, which is super nice. And this is especially nice if you need to like add multiple event listener. Like let's say that you add this, and then you add an hover, and then you add something else, and then you add something else. You can just like one instruction will remove all the listeners, so they are all tied to the same signals. Pretty slick, but let's do this. And let's say that we have let ID is equal $state 0. And we can actually use the button to increase the ID. So we can do on click is equal to ID plus plus. So let's say that you have this very cool and very useful action. Like right now, there's no way to do use melt action, because the moment you do this, you get this type directive is not valid on components. So you cannot use this directive on components. However, you can use attachment. So you can do attach, and then you can attach something. But this is an action, it's not the same as an attachment. So what you can do is you can do from action, and then you need to pass the action itself, melt action. And the second argument is the argument like the ID. So you can do ID. You do need to pass it as a function, because otherwise it will rerun more than it need to. But now basically you are using this action on this button, and it's being spread in. So now this will actually work. We start with ID 0, and then we do 0 the first time, and then we do 1 the second time, and stuff like that. And the nice thing is that this is actually like behaving exactly like if I do use melt action is equal to ID. So like this is literally the same thing. So as you can see, like it logs the same thing. If I click here, it logs 0. If I click here, it logs 0. If I click here, it logs 1 and stuff like that. So it's literally the same thing. So you can basically use it on your components. Pretty nice, and pretty proud of this idea. Fix only rerun directly applied attachment if it changed. So this was something that like there's actually another PR that will like do that also for spreading attributes and stuff like that, because right now there is a bit of a problem with attachments, which is that if anything else, like if you spread it a props inside, let's say that you spread something on a component and then the component spreads in the attachment into the button, it will basically rerun the attachment, which is a bit annoying. But even worse, it was doing the same thing in legacy mode. So if you had something like this, and you had, let's say that you had an attachment like this. So let's say that you have this, I don't know, let's say that we are in legacy mode where you can actually use attachment, and you can do, I don't know, like count is equal to 0 and attach. It's a function that just log like reattached like this. If you do something like this and you do button on, remember we are in legacy mode, so we do on click and we do id.count plus plus, and then we close this and we do id.count, and then let's say that I do add attach id.attach. So obviously like this will attach this id.attach to this button, which is nice. It's expected. But now when I increase count, oh, obviously this is actually fixed now. So before, when you increased count, it was rerunning the attachment because like in legacy mode, all of this is actually invalidated. And so this was invalidated, and by being invalidated, it means that it would reattach again, which was pretty annoying. We have a nice comment from Mike John Iviota, which is it's not displaying for some reason. I don't know why, it's never happening, but regardless, it's basically saying I remove 80% of effect and replace it by attach, which is what you should do. So big props to Mike to do this. Let's go over the rest of the changelog, and it's fix property remove event listener, properly remove event listener in component remove event listener. Oh, I actually missed this PR. It's also quite old. I don't know. Oh, this is a Svelte 4. So yeah, there was this that was actually, like as you can see, like this is Svelte 4.2.20. So it's a release of Svelte 4. And I think this was a maintenance release, like it was just a backport of a bug. So yeah, like we are still releasing Svelte 4. 5.32.1, which is warn when an invalid select multiple value is given. So basically, like this is if you use select multiple and the value, it's a single value, it's not an array, then it will warn you at runtime, I think. Then we have 5.32.2, which is simplify pre-cleaning. So the pre-tag, it's something that is very weird, because basically the browser pre-tag, if you do something like pre, And so let's say that I have this A here. If I go to the next line, as you can see, it's not actually adding a next line. So if the first line of a pre-tag, it's a \n, so if it's a carriage return, if it's the only line, then it will remove it. It will be removed. If you go to the next line, then there will be two. So it's a weird word, but it works, I guess. So yeah, this obviously was needed. Like we had some complicated logic to do so, and now it was relaxed. There is a better algorithm for this. Fix attach Svelte meta correctly to elements following CSS wrapper. So this was another problem. So when you use a component and you do, so if you do button dash color is equal to red, I hope that you know that you could do something like this. So if you do something like this, what happens is that Svelte is automatically passing this as a CSS property inside the button. So inside the button component, you can actually use that CSS property. So for example, if I do style and I do button background is equal to var color, you can see maybe that there is a very, let me add something inside button. Okay, now it's working. Hi. So as you can see, like it is red, and I can change this from here by saying green, for example. So this works, but if you take a look at like the output of this, you can see that we are basically wrapping your button inside a Svelte CSS wrapper with, and this basically allow us to like pass in those CSS variables, However, there is an extra element here, and we were attaching the Svelte meta, which is used by the Svelte extension to show you, like, when you hover over something, by the Svelte inspector, when you hover over something and you click, it's reading this Svelte meta to showing you this information and to open the right component in VS Code. We were attaching it to the wrong element, to the CSS wrapper instead of the actual element. So yeah, this was actually changed. Import untrack directly from client in Svelte attachment. So I was importing untrack for inside, like, to when I did the from action, I was importing directly from Svelte, like the Svelte thing, like the export. However, this is problematic because it was causing on the server of import, and like there was a warning, nothing particular, but it's something that we could fix. So we have 5.32.0, and this is also something that I added. Like this was my first, like the first step towards the Svelte custom renderer API, which I'm working on right now. So, by the way, we are also looking for funding. So if you're interested in a custom renderer API for Svelte, like the company I work for has started sponsoring this effort, but like we're also looking for funding, and you will get other stuff. But so if you're interested, however, like this was the first step toward that goal, and now there is a new compiler option, which is Fragments. So when you can actually see it in the compiler option here, Fragments. So what is changing is that basically, like, as you can see, when let me create a simpler component. No, I don't want to quit arc, sorry. Be high, right? So when you create something like this, as you can see, like Svelte, it's actually like using a string here, and then after using a string, it's actually reading, like it's getting this element from this string in some way. So what we are doing under the hood is something like this. So we take your string, like function, like from HTML. This is a string. And what we do is we do const template is equal to document dot create element template. And the template element, if you don't know about it, but basically it's an actual HTML element that you can use like this. And when you render a template, hi from this week in Svelte, when you use a template, if you see, like, it's not actually rendering on the page. And the reason why it's not rendering on the page is because this is actually just a template. So you can use this to create all sort of HTML element, and then you can just like document.querySelect this and extrapolate all the elements that you actually wrote into JavaScript. And so we're using something similar. So what we do is we create a template on the fly. We do template.innerHTML is equal to string. And then we return template.content. So this is basically creating a fragment, which is just a collection of nodes, of HTML nodes, that is not attached to any document. And we use it to attach event listener and then push it into the DOM and stuff like that. That said, so this was obviously it's problematic for custom renderer, because obviously if you need to render a links element, there's no such thing as the template links element. And so this was the first step, but this was also fixing a couple of problems, because as you can see, here we are using inner HTML. Now there are some CSP policy that actually prevent you from doing any inner HTML at all. So if you do template.innerHTML, your CSP policy will basically yell at you. This is safe, obviously, because it's not a problem if you do this, but some CSP policies will actually yell at you. And so now, instead of from HTML, so let's go back to be high. So instead of doing this, you can actually specify fragments, and you have either HTML or tree. So if you do tree, you can see that this is actually changing, and instead of having a single, basically a single, instead of having a string, it's actually compiling your component into a series of, it's an array with B and high inside. The children it looks like this. So if I do title is equal to cool, it's something like this. So as you can see, it's it's passing the props. This is the children and stuff like that. So with this, what from tree is doing under the hood, it's manually calling document.createFragment, document.createElement, and document.whatever. And so by doing this, basically, you can actually prevent the CSP things. However, please make sure, just do this if you know what you're doing, because this is actually slower than HTML. So please know what you're doing if you want to do this. In the same release, we also add XHTML compliance. So this was actually a problem that was gonna be solved by the tree, but Rich actually, while reviewing the PR, said, yeah, we can fix it even for the template, so let's just do it. The problem here was that, as you can see, when you have something like script let n is equal to $state 0, for example, I don't know if this will be enough, and yeah, no, it will not be enough, because it needs to change n++. So if I change it, is it doing it? I think it's not doing it, but let's do if, and I just want to quickly show you. Okay, so if you do something like this, obviously, like, we need something to anchor to when we need to add and remove this node from within B, we need something to anchor to. And if the node is completely empty, we cannot like put something next to it in a coherent way. So what we do is we add a small HTML comment. So this is an HTML comment. Like, if you parse this, when the browser parses this, it will actually like show up as a proper HTML comment like this. So if I do like this, so this is an HTML comment. So if you do something like this, this will become an HTML comment. However, it will only do that in HTML. If you're using XHTML, which is a more strict way of writing your HTML, which you should not use, by the way, but if you're using XHTML, then it will complain. And the same thing, it will complain if you use an input and you don't self-close it. So in XHTML, if you do input like this, it will complain because you need to close it. Sorry, if you do it like this, it's fine. If you don't do it like this, it will complain. But as you can see, like in this case, it's being automatically closed by Svelte. So that was the fix that actually allowed to be XHTML compliant. We have another fix, which is make deriveds on the server lazy again. So this was with this feature here, allow state field, there was a problem because derived were now eagerly evaluated on the server. So as soon as you were declaring derived, it was immediately evaluated, and this was problematic because like state might not already be ready. Like maybe you are initializing the state in the constructor, and so like derived had to be turned lazy again. So this is a nice fix. Let's go to SvelteKit and let's see if we have some new release. We have one new release, which is chore clarify which function handle fetch affects. So this was probably JS doc comment. And ensure .env and app environment are correctly set while analyzing server nodes. So there is this new feature that if you are directly and statically analyzable using export const SSR, we'll do it with like by statically analyze it, so that you can actually directly use inside the plus page.js. If you set SSR to false, you can actually just use window, for example. And like the .env and $app environment was not properly set, and so now they are. Let's move to, let's see if there were some new release. There was some new release about ESLint plugins Svelte. Improve performance of ignore comment extraction. Consistent selector style. Detection of repeated elements such as in each. No top level browser global, false positive for type annotation. So if you like, there is this ESLint rule that prevent you from using top level browser globals because otherwise during SSR it will be problematic. But there were some false positive with type annotation, and now they're not. Svelte. Oh, it's actually a brand new like rule, which is the one that we just talked about. So pretty nice. Let's fly through this. We have some new release of the extension. This was, if I remember correctly, this was just a perf improvement. Bail on giant export map when analyzing auto import cache. So it's just some performance stuff, and I'm pretty sure it's the same for language server. Yeah, and it's probably the same for SV, maybe something else more though. Lucia require user redirect moved to outguard function. So Lucia it's a guide to like implement authentication, and you can actually get the implementation of the guide directly with SV. And now it was fixed. Expose runs after to add-on. So this was something that like it's a utility function that they are using inside SV, and it's now exposed to add-on. Directory selection placeholder value was taken as folder path. So if you select, so if you just submit with the placeholder, it was actually taken as a folder path, which was wrong. Account for node current release with even measures when resolving types node version. Nice. Let's see if we have something else. We don't. So we can move to the showcase of today. Sorry, like I know that Chris has been waiting silently and patiently inside like the video.ninja thing that we use. And so it's finally time to switch to his scene because he's gonna talk all about, let me switch. So here's Chris, and he's the maintainer of Skeleton, which you might have heard of, I hope. And he's gonna talk all about Skeleton because there is the new release of 3.0, and I'm gonna fade away and let him talk. If you have any question, drop them in chat because I will actually collect them, and then later we will do a Q&A.
Yeah, and thank you for the great intro there. Really appreciate seeing everything about the attachments coming down the road for Svelte as well. I'm very excited about actually getting to use those. Light and dark mode, kind of just free out of the box. Lots of different like built-in themes and things like that you can use to kind of change the interface, things like that, as well as kind of giving you options for creating your own theme and kind of styling that. We also pair all of this with Tailwind, so it gives it kind of that level of like standardization and kind of uniformity that Tailwind kind of provides to everybody. So I know it's a little bit of a controversial thing. I know not everybody's a fan of Tailwind, but we'll talk through a little bit of that today of why we use that and what the benefit is there. Just kind of a little brief history lesson, of like where we came from. So Skeleton kind of came out of a project that I was working on years and years ago. This is back in 2022. I was working in a small company. We were building a platform where we had multiple applications, and we just needed some kind of like interface that sort of scaled. We need a design system. We needed a component library that would work across multiple apps that had very different like branding and styling and all of that. And so we built Skeleton internally as this tool to initially sort of solve that problem. It was just going to be a tool for us, right? But we decided, as things progressed, we got things kind of really rolling. We're like, hey, I think there's something here. I think this is maybe something that we might want to consider open source and putting out there for the community. Fortunately, the company that I was working at, they closed, and so it was a little brief period of a couple months where I was like, Skeleton maybe just almost didn't exist. It just might have ceased to be. But kept talking with my business partner, and we I said, hey, I think we've got something here. Let's put it out there and just see if anybody uses it, see if anybody bites. And so we open sourced and I think it was August 2022. And since then, things have just snowballed. We've gone from being like, unknown in the space to, folks, recognizing the project and things like that. So really kind of a cool experience to see that grow, see our community grow. Like we have something like 3,000 folks on Discord now that, we just provide support for and hang out and things like that. So just a really cool experience to see that go from nothing to what it is today, so very, very cool experience. Now, as far as like what we do, kind of in a nutshell, we use like Svelte to provide components. So you might have seen similar options. Component libraries existed for all different frameworks for a long time. We have nice Svelte option. Ours is a little different in that we are not necessarily providing components as the sort of forefront of what Skeleton is. We are, especially with the new release that we're going to talk about today, we've kind of flipped that on its head, where now we're kind of focusing more design system, and then the components just kind of complement that. They're an extension of that, and they implement and utilize the design system that we implement. So we'll talk about a little bit of like the specifics of that, the way we build our components and how that works in just a moment. Beyond that, we also kind of provide just some general guidance for how to use and kind of how to set up your application. So things from like, how do I set up my layout? We have some guidance around that for like utilizing kind of native HTML and Tailwind kind of primitives and things like that to kind of create that, as well as just some integrations for the kind of greater ecosystem. So whether you want to maybe bring in your own like headless components, or you want to bring in like a popover library like floating UI or something like that, we have some guides and things like that to kind of help integrate and kind of go beyond just the basics there to kind of really help you kind of build your full application. So to start with, I also want to kind of talk a little bit about Tailwind, because it is a critical part of what Skeleton is and how it operates. A lot of component libraries, especially headless component libraries, which you see a lot of today, they provide the primitives. They provide the foundation for how you build your interfaces. So if you have an avatar or you have a switch or something like that, they provide that functionality, but they don't necessarily provide the UI, the visual portion of it, the interface itself, right? And so we go a little bit in a kind of a different direction here, in that we're providing this design system. And so this is built primarily utilizing features from and on top of Tailwind. And so if you've not used or never heard of Tailwind, it's essentially, think of it as a kind of a utility-based approach to creating and managing your CSS styling. So instead of just writing your style sheets and kind of putting that in a separate file and that kind of thing, Tailwind allows you to essentially create little utility classes that you put in line, and that just kind of like adds a color or changes the text style, or et cetera, et cetera. And so it's a little bit of a different approach, and then a lot of it's handled inline. But once it kind of clicks of how it's working, it's like, oh my gosh, this is really cool. Because personally, like speaking, I was not a huge fan of it when I first saw it, because I thought it was, or I mistake it, for like inline styles and things like that. But really what it's doing is it's providing, again, that word utility classes that allow you to encapsulate small bits of, your styling and reuse those over and over and over and over. So if you want to use a very set like padding size and you use that 100 times throughout your application, you're just going to use that same class over and over and over to do that. And so we bring that into Skeleton to kind of bring that kind of level of like standardization, because the classes are always the same. It's not, like in a team environment, this might come up where, you have your coworker and they're using this particular syntax for how they write their like margin styles or padding styles or whatever. And then I have my own approach, and then somebody else has their own approach, and then that's just chaos, right? And so it standardizes that process. So everybody's using the same language to kind of describe these styles. It's also easier to onboard, just because, again, everybody's speaking the same language, just makes that a little faster. The utility approach is really powerful, especially when it really kind of clicks of like how you can kind of mix and match utilities to kind of build kind of Lego block style to build some, more complex interfaces. And for us, it's extremely helpful for the design system, because we cover, and again, I'm going to go into more detail of like what the design system is itself, but it's things like your typography, color, all of these things. And again, just Tailwind comes in and just really saves the day and makes a lot of that stuff very easy for you. We're also really excited about a recent, they just recently released a new version of Tailwind 4, that brings some like first-class features that really, kind of overlap with the way Skeleton has traditionally worked over the last few years. So we've had this concept of themes for years and years, and now it's kind of like an official thing that's part of Tailwind. And so we're very excited to kind of see that approach and see that come into play. So speaking of the new release, kind of a quick overview of that. We've, just over the last couple, I think it was a month ago or so, we launched the new v3.0 release. Our kind of goal with this, when we set out to do this, was, we wanted to kind of take a step back and kind of reevaluate what is Skeleton, because when you start a project a few years back and then you kind of grow and grow and grow, you might not necessarily grow in the direction you really want to, or it may not necessarily like, you might, in our case, we kind of became a little bit of a jack of all trades. We were doing a little bit of everything and we didn't necessarily have that focus that I really wanted us to have. And so the new release really helps us kind of streamline and say, okay, here's what Skeleton is. We're going to focus on this kind of framework approach to design systems, and then also have this like very like streamlined kind of component library. And those two things working together can solve a lot of the interface problems that we have, especially if maybe you're not super design savvy or that kind of thing. So, to kind of give some specifics here and kind of show, exactly what I'm talking about when I say things like design system and things like that. So, just want to show a few parts on the website here. So we're just going to browse through real quick, and I'm just going to show you a few things. So, first and foremost, most folks start in the design side. So they'll start with a designer on their team, or maybe they are the designer on the team in addition to being a front-end developer. And so we do provide some assets for folks to come in and utilize this for Figma. So like if you need to kind of plan out and mock or kind of, kind of figure out what your interfaces look like ahead of time, we do provide some assets that allow you to kind of get a head start on that. So that's kind of very like, tip of the iceberg start of the design system. We also have the theme system, which I was kind of showing a moment ago, where you can kind of click through and kind of jump through and create different things like that. We provide a theme generator that goes along with that, allows you to kind of like customize what your theme is. So you can come in here and be like, okay, I just want a random color, and kind of try that out and see that actually applied to the interface here. And you have a whole set of, various palettes and colors and things like that you can kind of mix and match to, create your brand or kind of represent your brand. And so we provide all these different controls for how you can input that. We provide some opinionation about how many colors and how they're named and things like that. Again, kind of following those tailwind conventions, following that standardization, so that it's very easy for folks to understand, like, here's how I use this particular color, or here's how I do this and that. You'll also note that we cover things like typography. So you have a lot of your typography systems sort of sorted and provided through that. And just again, lots of different configuration through the preview here. I can also kind of come in here and like import a couple of our like existing themes, because we provide, something like 20 or so just out of the box for you. So if you want to say, hey, I really like this Nouveau theme, but I want to maybe change, I don't like this yellow, I can tweak or change that. You can do all that. Or if you really want, you can kind of start all the way from scratch and just kind of like clear everything out, just grayscale. I want to start from scratch and work your way up. You can do that. So kind of whatever level you're at with the themes, you have lots of different options for that. The other kind of cool thing with the themes is that you have the ability to come in here and really kind of customize even those preset themes. So if you use one of those out of the box, we still allow you to overwrite and adjust things, because what a theme is, and it's kind of easier to show here. What a theme is just essentially a set of properties. And so CSS custom properties, or variables as they're sometimes called, just allow you to come in here and see like lots and lots of, essentially document all these different options. So, hey, here's this particular like font that I'm going to use, or here's how I'm going to identify a color, and all of my different colors and contrast tones and all of that thing. And we just kind of structure that for you. So rather than trying to have to like reinvent the wheel and figure out how you organize and structure all this, we do that for you. That's what the theme system is really geared towards and trying to solve for you. So again, even if you want to use one of our themes, it's just CSS custom properties. So it's very easy to come in and overwrite those things. So you can just literally come in here and like grab your theme that you're going to do in your CSS and just overwrite a value. You want to change spacing value, or you want to change, colors or that kind of thing. You can do all of that. So very multiple approaches to how you really approach that and tackle that. One of the key focuses, obviously, of a design system is your color palette. And so we provide a very kind of an opinionated approach to, what your palette is, with the name of each kind of color, primary, secondary, that kind of thing, without it being tied to, something too specific. So you might have a brand where it's like Starbucks, and Starbucks has a very specific green. So you don't want to call your color green, because maybe the branding changes at some time. It's blue later or something like that. And so we provide this kind of, again, this approach to abstract that so that if you need to swap or change that anytime, you still have that like relation, but it's not necessarily like hard coded and you have to go change it in a million different places. We provide a few more kind of advanced features with colors, so I won't dive too much into that, but definitely recommend checking out the docs here. There's some cool stuff here with color pairings and things like that. So again, some cool stuff for you to kind of look into if you want to go a little further, a little deeper into the pool. As far as typography, we provide kind of a very structured approach. We provide kind of a typographic scale is the term for it, where you can essentially set a base scaling factor. And so as you adjust this, all of your font sizes kind of adjust based on that scale. And so you're not necessarily adjusting each individual property, which you can, but you're adjusting that scale value so that if you want kind of lots of big headers or smaller headers, or you generally want the overall size to change, you have that kind of hook that you can tie into and change that, which is really, really cool. Typical stuff, headings, paragraph styles, block quotes, all that stuff is covered as well. We also do provide kind of a very what I call semantic typography, which is again kind of that opinionated approach of how do you name and how do you utilize these kind of canned styles that mix some of the primitives that we provide. So here's a font color and a font style, and how do you mix and match those and create something that's working and has that kind of common language between all of your team members to how do you identify that. We provide some ways to approach that and handle that. Additionally, we tie into, again, we're built on top of Tailwind. Tailwind v4 introduces a really cool like dynamic spacing system. So if you are handling things like width, height, padding, margin, all of those different kind of space properties, you can now set a scaling factor to adjust that. And it looks really kind of cool in our little presentation here of like, hey, we see these get bigger and smaller, but you may be wondering, like, what does that look like in a kind of actual application? What's the kind of practical look for that? And so we kind of provide just a quick kind of preview over here where you can kind of see, like, as you adjust, there's more padding, there's more spacing, there's things like that. So it's going to be a little bit harder to see if I'm zoomed in too much, but yeah, you can kind of see like buttons get much tighter, much looser, that kind of thing. So that's the spacing system. And then on top of that, we also provide presets. So presets are, excuse me, are sort of a way to kind of build upon what Tailwind considers a component. So, excuse me, you might hear that term component and be thinking like, oh, it's a Svelte component, or oh, it's that kind of thing. All of a component is in the Tailwind world is a collection of CSS properties. So if I have like a card, I might have a background color, padding, and things like that. That kind of mix or collection of different styles, that's a component in the Tailwind world. And so we provide, again, more opinionation for how you can kind of approach that. And so we sort of control form. So here's the general like layout or size of something, and then things like color and style, those are separate, and that's where the presets live in that second category. It's how do I get a field style, a tonal style, outline style, have a gradient or something like that. And so we again provide a lot of these out of the box for you, but also provide that kind of that sort of guardrail or kind of way for you to build on top of that system, kind of extend it as you see fit. And so if you want to have maybe a button or something like that uses these styles, but you don't necessarily see one that meets that kind of requirements for your particular application's aesthetic, then that's where you can kind of go and kind of grow and create your own preset, which is really cool. The last part of the design system is is iconography. It's not something that we handle because we just kind of feel like others solve this problem much better than us. And so you can actually bring whatever icon library you want. So if you like simple icons, or you like hero icons, or you like, something like that, you can bring whatever solution you want. We personally do kind of like push for Lucide, which is a really great option. It's this kind of like cool sort of outline style. They have lots of different options. It's very friendly and easy to use with Svelte. Very easy to set up, and we just kind of show you how to set that up real quick. And then if you're going through our documentation, you're going to see lots of examples where maybe we have a button that has an icon, it's going to always kind of default to showing loose seeds. So you can use that as you see fit. We talked a little bit about kind of these difference between components. So this idea of like a tailwind component versus a functional component. So we can kind of look at a few of those. So we have things like badges, buttons, cards, things like that. These are the things that we handle with basically pure CSS, or tailwind in this case. And these are just CSS styles on top of semantic elements. So if we go and look at, say, like buttons, we can kind of look at the code and see, oh yeah, that's just using a normal button, and we just apply a particular set of classes, and that styles the button. So we can say, okay, this is a button, and it's going to use one of those presets we were just talking about for the color styles and things like that. And that's kind of the utility approach, right? The tailwind thing of, let's kind of mix a couple different classes, and then by kind of doing that, we get some kind of result. And so it could be a button that's this color, or it's a button that's this style, or on and on, maybe a different size, or different state, or something like that. And so that's really kind of the power of these kind of this tailwind approach, is you get to remain in the kind of interface of the web. You get to use these native semantic elements that have great accessibility, that allow you to, especially if you're working in Svelte and things like that, sometimes you want to be able to just hook directly into the button or the input or whatever elements on the page without having to worry about maybe that abstraction of, oh, it's put inside of a functional component, like a Svelte component, and I can't access it. I can't put this property, or I can't put this, particular attribute that I want on there. We just kind of eliminate that by letting you just kind of use the native web, right? So we try to embrace that as much as possible, and first and foremost. There are those cases where you need to go beyond that, and the web just does not provide a solution that we feel is adequate for whatever reason. Things like an avatar, that's not something you would probably ever see just kind of built into the web. It might be an image component, but hey, what if you need a fallback, or what if you need to have some kind of like canned styling that carries across? Or what if you need to have a fallback if the image fails to load, things like that. So that's where components come in. And so for our Svelte components, they're very simple. You import the component and implement it, set some various properties on it, such as the source for this image, maybe give it a name, which can be used as fallback for generating like initials or something like that for the user. And then that's what you see. So you can see like the initials, you could insert like an icon in there. There's lots of different options that, again, kind of goes beyond, here's where the native web ends, and then here's where we need to kind of build our, these kind of custom interfaces. And that's where these kind of functional components come in. They add very, specific types of interfaces with also this level of like logic and state and things like that, that you really need in a practical application. So a couple of things I want to kind of talk about for the functional components, especially for v3, is that part of the big update that we've just pushed out, kind of updated all the things. It sort of broke everything while we were doing it too, which is unfortunate, but we knew we needed to do this because Svelte was releasing Svelte 5, so we knew we wanted to be able to support runes and snippets on these cool new features. We knew Tailwind had this big new release coming, and just on our side, we wanted to be able to do a little bit more with their components. So we kind of really went back to the drawing board and really kind of rethought, what is a component for us, and how do we want it to work? And so initially we kind of started down this path where we wanted to go kind of framework agnostic. We wanted to be able to support Svelte, but maybe something like Vue or something like that. But if you have ever gone down that road, it's hard to maintain components that work in these kind of multiple situations, right? So Vue has these particular APIs, Svelte has these particular APIs. How do I make all my functionality for that particular component line up? And so we tried doing that. We tried creating and maintaining all of that lined up, but really started to struggle with that because we just couldn't hit that level of quality we wanted, especially with things like accessibility and things like that. And so what we ended up doing is moving to use a tool called Zag. And so if you've not heard of Zag, it is a tool by the creator of Chakra UI from the React world. And what they've essentially done is they've taken and created a sort of headless component system, not unlike something like Bits UI or Melt UI in the Svelte world, but made that framework agnostic. That's the kind of like the catch. That's the important part, because they don't build these primitives just for one particular framework. They build it for in this case, 4 different. They've got React, Svelte, Vue, and Solid. And so we're very excited about this because we wanted to be able to like say, hey, let's eliminate this kind of process of having to maintain, unified accessibility, maintain a unified set of features across different frameworks and things like that. How do we make this work in that kind of way? And Zag was really the best solution. We could, just kind of knocked it out of the park. It provides a number of new features that our components never, in previous versions was never able to support. The accessibility is greatly improved because we've centralized that process of, hey, anybody that uses these primitives are going to want the accessibility there. So whether it's Chakra building their component library on top of that, or Skeleton building our component library on top of that, we centralize and we have multiple the way they need to be. Things, buttons and events and ARIA states and things like that. Those are all to the level they need to be. Now, the kind of important part of here is that, it really allowed us to focus, again, on what is the important, or what is the unique portion of Skeleton. And kind of, I mentioned it earlier, of like, we kind of flipped it on our head of like components were kind of the thing that everybody knew us for previously. And now we're really kind of pushing forward this design system, right? And so it allows us to focus more on that other layer, that design system, and not have to worry so much about how do we rebuild the same component that 10 other libraries out there have, and that kind of thing, because lots of options there. That's not the interesting thing. It's that design system, right? So how do we focus and put more time into that? So again, another benefit that Zag allowed for that. Part of this change, and I kind of mentioned, like we kind of went through this process, like, hey, everything was updating, breaking, and changed, and things like that. Is we knew we needed to change a few things on our side, which included things like how do you actually provide styles to the component. And so, historically, we've had this system in Skeleton where you would have a component, and say an avatar component, you would have a particular property like background, and you would provide it one of those tailwind utility classes, right? So background blue 500. So in this case, it's going to change, as you'd expect, the background to blue color. So that's the approach we've always used, but we've always had this kind of issue with the Skeleton components in that what you're essentially trying to do is build a class list for a particular element within that component. So maybe I have an avatar here, right? And it's using a figure and an image tag inside of it. And so how do I pass my classes in such a way that they build the class list that I want to do? And the reason that's important is that precedence is a really big issue when it comes to using this kind of utility approach using Tailwind. Because if you have multiple, classes that are trying to overwrite the same thing, you have a green background and a red background, which one actually, is applied, right? And so what we did in our approach to that was we created these particular props. And so you have background, and that's a slot, and maybe has a default color. And then if you want to replace that, it just takes your value you've passed in, replaces that, and just updates the class list with that instead. That works pretty well, and most folks have really taken to this approach. I'm going to talk in just a moment about some future updates we're going to have to this that makes this a little simpler, because you might be looking at this and being like, oh, there's all these different properties and I've got to remember all of them and that kind of thing. That's some stuff we're still kind of cooking on. So some cool stuff coming down the road for that. The other cool thing is we don't necessarily intend for our components to be the be-all end-all solution for everybody. Like we provide them because they come styled by default to utilize your styling for skeletons. So if you have something like a progress bar and you change your theme, it's going to update and kind of adhere to those colors that is part of your theme, which is very, just automatic, just out of the box, that sort of thing just works. But there's a lot of folks that are maybe power users that are like, hey, I want to have full control, or I want to use maybe an alternative to something like Zag to build those myself. And so with the new release, we've actually done that. We've allowed you to come in and provided kind of like these first class sort of tutorials for how do I use Bits UI as my like headless component solution, but still pair that with Skeleton's theme system. So if you really want that like fine-grained control, you can do that. And the other kind of cool thing, just as a side effect of this, is some of these libraries have more components than we have. Like Bits has a really nice calendar component here, as you're seeing, and just immediately gives you access to this. Now, the other kind of, and this is like the really where it all tends to come together for me personally, is that you can also mix and match. So if you like Skeleton's components, you can use all of those. But if you do need that component that doesn't yet, exist on our side, you can still reach for bits or melt or any of these options and implement that and use both of those in coordination within your application while still using that same unified design system and unifying interface and themes and all those on top of that, where everything just kind of meshes and it's just visually the end user has no idea of like this is from this and this is from that. They just look the same and they work the same. Do whatever you need to do, which is really, really cool. The other big update, just as part of the the V3 release, is we did kind of rethink our documentation. Any kind of project like this, you're going to have lots of information to convey from us as the developer to you as the user. And so we did lots of technical stuff behind the scenes, like the new documentation is built with Astro in place of SvelteKit, but we still use Svelte. We still use Svelte components to handle a lot of the reactive examples and things like that, so search and stuff like that. We just did generally improved, search and reporting a little easier. One of the big updates for this release is, of course, support for multiple, not only frameworks, but meta frameworks. So if you are from the Svelte world, you might want to use SvelteKit, or maybe you just want to use kind of vanilla Vite, if you will, with just Skeleton as Svelte as your component library. So we still allow you to kind of go through, and we provide some guidance around how to do that. It's really up to you what you want to apply, if you want to have a framework or not have a framework. Our only requirement is that if you want to use components, you have Svelte in there. And if you want to use the design system, you have to have Tailwind. But beyond that, it's up to you how you structure your application. But again, part of the documentation updates is just explaining that and kind of giving some guidance for how do I get started with SvelteKit, how do I get started with Vite, on and on and on. We've also done, just a lot of work to kind of explain kind of these basics and the themes and how the theme is structured. And if you really want to get in the nitty gritty of like what are the theme properties and how they work and things like that, we've documented a lot of that stuff. So it's readily available to you. We've also provided a new cookbook section, which is really cool for just odds and ends, the things that just don't fit elsewhere. And it's not a component, it's not something we're providing. We just want to provide some guidance for here's how you can handle this, or here's how you can build it. So just little recipes for maybe how you can implement Skeleton with a native dialogue element, for example. So you can see that's using that in place of like a third-party library, like a floating UI or something like that, and just kind of provide some guidance for that. Here's how you can take the best of Svelte and Tailwind and Skeleton and put those together and create something new. And then if you're kind of on the end that you want to contribute or help with Skeleton, we provide kind of a very detailed section for that. And then also if you're a machine learning type person that's keen to this stuff, we've provided some access to that. So it gives you a way to kind of consume that and utilize that for figuring out code examples, things like that. But yeah, kind of in a nutshell, that covers a lot of what we've changed. There's a lot. Obviously, it took nearly about a year for us to kind of pull all this together. Everything updating was all at one time was quite the challenge to overcome. But it's been really interesting to see it all kind of come together and see this kind of approach of like the Zag-based components and this kind of more streamlined design system a year plus ago. So it's been a really cool experience to see that. And, reaction's been really great. If you are somebody that's maybe using Skeleton today, I will also point out that if you are looking to upgrade, to migrate from an older version, we do have a guide for that. It is a little bit more in depth than maybe you might be first expecting. Mostly because the things I mentioned, Svelte had a major update, Tailwind had a major update, we had a major update, and all of those things together kind of in coordination require a little bit more effort. Well, we've provided some CLI tooling to kind of help automate some of the process and things like that, but there's a few things you'll just kind of have to do manually. I will say if you can, feel free to start a fresh project if that's a possibility for you, because then you just kind of eliminate all that and just start from the ground up, using all the new features, which is always really nice. So with that, I think probably switch over and do maybe a quick kind of hands-on. Just want to kind of show, what that process looks like for getting started with Skeleton, because you might be wondering, like, okay, yeah, I've given you a lot of theory, I've given you a lot of like, here's how this works and that works, but let's, maybe see it in practice, right? And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually open and switch over to VS Code. Or actually, let me do this real quick. I'm going to switch over to my browser. And so what I've done here is I've gone through installation section for Skeleton, and you see the Svelte kit section. And I've run these first couple commands just to kind of save us some time. And so I'm using SV, which is the CLI for creating new Svelte projects, right? Just started a new project. We're using TypeScript. We're also using Tailwind, which is prompted to install as part of that process. And then I've also installed Skeleton. And so Skeleton comes in two packages for us. We have the core package, which is handling the design system I was talking about. And then we have the Svelte package, which is the package of components that we're going to utilize. So our avatars and accordions and things like that. So just set up the project, installed those couple packages, and then I'm going to jump into VS Code, and we're going to just kind of start building that. So here's what the application looks like right now. There's not much to it. It's just pretty bare bones Svelte kit application. Nothing too crazy, nothing too fancy there. I'm going to switch over to VS Code real quick. There we go. Okay. And just make sure that's on there. Yep. And just highlight a couple of things. So again, it's a bare bones Svelte kit application. If we look in here, you're going to see kind of all the usual things you're used to seeing. We do have those two packages I mentioned, the Skeleton package and the core package and the Svelte package. So we have components. And then the first thing I'm really going to do is I'm going to jump over and go into my app.css that Tailwind creates as part of the SV onboarding process. So you're going to see it's just going to import Tailwind for us, but we need to add just a couple more things on here. So I'm just going to paste these in real quick. So we're just going to first import the core style sheet from Skeleton. This is kind of laying out the base layer, adding our Tailwind components and those things, just kind of enabling us to use those. We're also going to have an optional install for presets, because we don't necessarily assume that you want to use all of the presets that we provide. So we make that optional. If you decided not to, you could just kind of nuke that. Most folks just rock with it on because it's pretty handy. And then finally, we have one of our preset themes, one of the themes that we provide built in. This one's called Cerberus, but we could easily change that the name here and use any of the themes that we have available to us. This last little bit, it's just a little technical requirement for Tailwind to understand where our components live, so that it can go and say, oh, I need to know what styles those components are going to use. So let me make sure I put those in the CSS bundle. And that's what this line is doing. It's just kind of grabbing those styles and making sure that those end up in our bundle. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save that and open our app.html file. There's one quick change we need to make on here, which is to append what theme we're using. So on our HTML tag here at the top, we're just going to add data theme, and then we're going to, again, use that same kind of imported theme we have. The reason we do it like this is that you could potentially have multiple themes. So we could have maybe Mint as another option, right? So I could import both of those themes so they could potentially be displayed to users. And then the tag here is showing what is actively assigned to users. So if you want to create a theme switcher, kind of like we have on our documentation, you would just create the logic to essentially assign and change that value. So change this from Cerberus to Mint, and then you'll see that display update for the end user. But for now, we're just going to go with a single theme, just keep it simple and do just like that. And then finally, we're going to go over here and we're going to look at our application. I'm going to switch back on the recording here real quick. Sorry, juggling a couple windows, so this takes just a second. All right, and then we're going to go here. And there's our update, right? We have a new kind of like dark theme by default here. We can see, the colors and fonts maybe shifted a little bit depending on the theme we're using. But for the most part, it's just a very subtle change. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of come into VS Code. I'm going to keep the app open just for a second, so you're not going to see this. But I'm just going to come in and add a couple styles onto the page, just so we can see some improvement, see something actually visually change on the page itself. So I'm going to open the root page, and I'm going to do main. Do this as quick as possible so you don't feel like you're missing out. I want to save. All right, so we're adding a little padding here, and then I'm also going to add one element real quick, and I'll switch over to the code view in just a second so you can see what this looks like on that side as well. All right, save that, and there we go. So we have a button. I just wanted to add that real quick so we could confirm that we are actually getting the theme we wanted. So we're getting that blue button, which is part of the Cerberus theme. Cerberus is the theme that you're seeing kind of displayed on here with these blues and black colors and things like that. So yeah, that looks right. We know our theme is working. We know styles are working. We know presets are working because I'm using a preset for that. So if we want to jump back over into VS Code real quick, we can actually take a look at what I just changed and why that and how that's being applied. Okay, so there we go. So all I did was come in here, added kind of a wrapping element. It could be main, it could be a div, whatever you want it to be here. And then added P10, so that's a utility class from Tailwind that adds padding of 10. 10 is not a set value, it's a relative value based on scaling, things like that. And then I added a button here at the bottom, and this button has a class of BTN for button. And then I'm using one of those presets that we were talking about earlier to kind of add the styling to the button. So if I wanted to change that to secondary color, I could change that, and it would be, I think, a purple or another shade, that kind of thing. So very simple to do that. Now, that's your Tailwind utilities, or that's your Tailwind components, right? So we're just using pure classes, pure CSS to enable the styling for this particular native, semantic HTML element. Now, if we need to kind of go a step further, we need to have maybe let's add like an avatar component. That'd be kind of a quick one to implement. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of copy in a couple of things here. So first of all, we need the import script at the top here. So we're going to import this from Skeleton. You'll see it's coming from that Svelte specific package that we talked about. That's just the components themselves. And then on the page, I'm also going to drop our component here. So we have the avatar component that we've imported. We've got the source. It's got a kind of just a preset URL that we know will work. And then we have kind of a name that can be used for fallbacks and alt text and things like that. So I'm going to save that. And again, we'll switch back over and we'll come over here and we'll look real quick at our other page. Yes. And there we go. There's our avatar. And so simple as that, we've managed to come in here, set up a basic project, add the very minimal kind of scaffolding it takes to kind of get your styles and themes in place. We've managed to implement a Tailwind component, and we've managed to implement a functional component, a Svelte component, that's our avatar with that particular image in place. So it's a very, very simple process, I think, to kind of get started and get rolling with Skeleton. And then from there, it's just a matter of kind of growing more and more and more. You want to maybe look at our guides for things like setting up your basic layouts, which we provide here. Maybe you're curious to know more about how like light and dark mode work. So we have documentation that kind of talks through that. Just a quick kind of note on that. We don't implement necessarily light or dark mode. We just utilize Tailwind system that's already provided by them. And we just kind of key into that. And they have a few kind of options for that, which is really cool. So by default, it's just going to look at your native operating system's preference for color. So I use a dark theme in macOS, and so it just uses the dark theme in my web application. But if you want to maybe pin it to a particular version or something like that, we provide steps for using their kind of what they call a selector strategy to do that. Just requires an addition to your style sheet and a quick class added to your HTML element on your document. So they also have like where you can use a data attribute instead of a class, things like that, and just talk a little bit about how we toggle our styles and themes between those kind of light and dark mode styles to make sure both of those are working. So again, won't go too far into that, but just wanted to point out we do provide those extra guides for going to that next extra step if you really want to see that. And I think with that, Paulo, if you would like to join me, we've covered everything I wanted to talk about. Oh, and I think you might be muted for me.
I'm actually muted.
Still
Sorry.
muted.
Sorry. I was muted
There we go. Okay, cool.
Sorry.
Great.
So yeah, this was
No problem.
cool. I actually think like first thing first, like I love the CSS first approach because I mean
Uh-huh.
sometimes like I'm very always very keen on progressive enhancement, and sometimes like obviously there are components that are not really
Yeah.
progressive enhanceable, but in my
Yeah.
CSS first
Yeah. We struggle a lot with like input elements. There's certain things you just can't style the way you really want to,
yeah.
and we still try to make it work best we can. But if there is an exception there, we do provide some alternatives. So select element, for example, is a good one. I think the browsers are just kind of in this phase where they're slowly kind of like moving towards the custom select. I think is what it's called, or one you can a new version replacement that allows more customization.
Yeah.
And so they've kind of just sort of abandoned the legacy version, and it's like this browser vendor and this browser vendor, they have completely different ways to style it. And so that's been sort of the challenge for us for leaning into native first, is like we really want that to work, but it doesn't always work. But we default to that because the accessibility story is almost always the best, as opposed to a custom component. Because try as Zag might, or anybody creating component system, is you want that level of accessibility. You don't want to leave any users out to the side just because you're making the component pretty, right? And so it's very, very critical that stuff works. And so it's wherever we can, we default to the native because it helps solve that problem.
Yeah,
So
but
I'm the type, like we're building a design system, but I'd rather it not be pretty but work really well if that's the only way to make it happen. So
yes, and like what I was saying is that I like the CSS first approach because like with that you can pretty much
yeah.
make it work. Like if you have CSS, you can just make it work with CSS, like, and then like apply
Yeah.
JavaScript to make it functional.
Right.
But at least you have a way to do it. I
Yeah.
think we have some questions, so let me
Yeah.
show them.
Oh, great.
So I mean, we have a bit of a praise from SRG, which said like the i18n looks nice. How do you do i18n? So yeah, I think it's like I don't think you actually do 18n like you don't provide a way to do 18n, but I think it's referring to the 18n of your website.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's something we're interested in pursuing. We'd love to have translations and things like that for other languages. I mentioned we built the new documentation using Astro, and that does provide ways for us to do that. Mostly, it's just a matter of manpower of how do we translate to those other languages. I only speak English, unfortunately. We do have a set of folks all over the world, that are contributing, but they don't necessarily have time to sit down and translate everything. So, it's the logistics. If we can figure out a way to make it work, I would love to translate to, Spanish, to you name it. Like we can and should be able to do that, if in the future, hopefully.
And like you also got a bit of a praise for like the teaming. I think that's a specifically nice part of Skeleton. Like you provide so many teams, and they are all very good. Like I think it really shows that like the foundation of Skeleton
Yeah.
was building a design system, because like you know what they are doing in terms of design.
Mhm.
Like I totally suck at design, and I could never come up with such a variety of teams, and so it's pretty cool. Even like just very often, I
And
also
we hear that a lot. We hear a lot of folks that are come in and they say, "Hey, I'm I'm a back-end developer, but I need a nice looking interface for my application. I'm working on the front end for this reason or that, and I just need something that works and it helps make it look pretty. And so we've really tried with, especially with the new version, to make it a very nice aesthetic just by default. But really, like, the long-term goal is we want Skeleton to be sort of a chameleon and look like what your application is going to be. So if you have a set of designers that have created and said, this is what a button looks like, and this is what this looks like, and all that, we want to provide you the tools to allow you to adapt your theme to look like that and function like that. And so that's the challenge part. That's the hard part, is how do you organize that in such a way that it works for this user, this company and this company and this company. And that's where a lot of the kind of work has been put in over the years to figure out, okay, how do we name our properties? What properties do we have available? Is this scalable? Does this work? Do we have enough, color values? Do we have, and that kind of thing, and that back and forth to really hit that sweet spot that makes it work for as many people as possible. And then even if it doesn't necessarily do it out of the box, you can kind of grow it, like those presets and stuff I was talking about. Like, you can either use those kind of canned options we have, or you can use the same concept to generate your own that have the very specific aesthetic that you have, while still adhering to automatically adopting those colors and automatically adopting spacing values and things like that. So it's both, we try to make it as smart as possible, but also as flexible as possible, so it can work for as many people as we really can.
Yep, that's pretty cool. And in general, I think like even the custom theme generator is pretty slick. Like it's nice.
Yeah. It was like, it started as a fun little like hobby project of like, hey, how can we make it where we can just kind of adjust some of these values real quick on the fly as a preview, and then it's kind of spiraled and grown until it's like this standalone tool that's fairly robust. And we even have some ideas of going even further with it, of like, how do we really kind of go that next level of like, you're creating your themes. Maybe you're curating your presets, you're creating, things like that, and a set of tools or a suite of tools that allow you to really kind of do that in a very like visual way, which I think a lot of people like click with it, especially if you're maybe not necessarily a designer. Like, just being able to have a few like canned options that you can kind of tweak and adjust, that can be huge, hugely beneficial for just getting started.
Yeah, but and also like, it's like, obviously it's much better to just like to visually see how a component will look like,
Exactly.
Instead of just guessing and then having to try it in your code.
And I kind of skimmed over it, but one of the new updates for v3 is that we've now made it where you can import your themes. So even if you're coming from Skeleton v2 or Skeleton v3, you can import your old theme and re-edit it there. So if you go through that process and you get it and then you put it in your app and you're like, that's not quite like I wanted it, that's not quite where I wanted it, you can still move that back in there, make those fine-tune adjustments, and then put it back. And so it really kind of gives you that whole like process for getting it and fine-tuning it the way you want.
SRG Senior General is also asking, do you have any examples of Skeleton in the wild? Any big project that we can see in action?
Yeah, there's a couple actually. So the Svelte Sirens website is built with Skeleton. The Superforms website is also, their documentation is built. It's an older version. It's not updated, so it doesn't really have all the bells and whistles of the new version, but that's on there. And then I'm actually looking, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, setting up like a showcase page where we'll show a few like very specific examples, because I've run into a few folks even just in the last couple of weeks that have like really beautiful sites built with Skeleton, and I want to show that off and show like the flexibility and like what that really looks like. And so fortunately I don't remember all the domains off the top of my head, I'm so sorry, but there are some great examples out there. And I just I can't express how like excited we were especially when Brittany and them adopted it for Svelte Sirens, because we're obviously getting a lot of use out of Svelte, and so to be able to contribute something back to the community like that, it's a huge deal for us. So,
and I think like, again, I think also Scott, which is a Svelte ambassador, uses Skeleton a lot. I guess like it's absolutely like it's
I will say, if I'm sorry I didn't catch the name, but if you will come onto our Discord, we do have a showcase channel on there, and there's people have just submitted their own, and so you get to see like a mix. Like, there's some folks that are new developers that are just creating a little fun hobby project, and then you get some folks that are building. There was a company that was building like this cool, like with 3D scanning and all kinds of crazy stuff, and all of those things are just built, with or using Skeleton. And so a lot of those I think use kind of like a lot of the just turnkey options, the presets, themes, things like that. But some of the ones that again I want to show in our showcase on the website will be further, like more advanced customization, like folks really kind of going to the deep end and using all the features to completeness. So keep an eye out for that. We're very keen to get that out for everybody.
We also have another question, which is to go deep into accessibility. Should we look into Zag, or the important bits are already handled by Skeleton?
So components, when you're talking components specifically, that's where Zag comes in. And so there's been a few cases where folks have come to us and said, hey, there's not this feature or this accessibility thing, is maybe have a question about it. And we always kind of push folks to the Zag side. The reason for that is, again, we're kind of centralizing. So there's Skeleton, there's Chakra, there's another library called ArcUI. All of these are built on top of these same primitives. And so if you solve it for this one place, you're not just solving it for us, for Skeleton, you're solving it for Chakra, you're solving it, so the best place when it comes to that like primitive level is to go back to Zag and kind of start there. But you are welcome to reach out for us if you ever have any questions on any of that, because we try to be a very inclusive and friendly, supportive community. So if it's on GitHub or it's on Discord or whatever, like, come on, we'll help answer those questions. Now, accessibility goes well beyond just ARIA attributes and things like that you assign to your components. It's also things like contrast ratios for your colors, and is this color visible? Is this particular matching and stuff like that. So that's the part where we're doing a little bit of that work for you with the theme generator, in that when you actually create, here I can actually show it. Sometimes it's easier to show than tell some of this stuff. Is when you have a particular color, so we have, say, our primary tone here, you see there's these like overlapping colors for the text, right? And even if you can't read the text, you can see the color is different, right? There's this kind of breakpoint where it switches from kind of a dark color to a light color to keep those contrast ratios working. But if we go in here and we adjust the colors themselves, so maybe make this, I don't know, like a green, you might see those breakpoints kind of adjust, where now it's down here where it's switching for you. And so we're handling a little bit of that for you automatically through the theme generator. And we're just doing that using some calculations, because colors to some degree are just math. And so you can run some calculations and some evaluations there to determine, hey, is this ratio adequate? Does it meet this particular, I forget all the acronyms, WGAC, particular value, things like that. And we're trying to meet those kind of like minimum requirements for you. Now, if you don't like what the generator is doing for you, remember, everything that we're doing is just generating code for you. So you can still come in here and look at your primary values and look in like the contrast terms and say, hey, it's using dark, dark, dark all the way to 600, but I want 700 to be included as well. So you can come in here and still edit the theme directly and have that manual control if you don't like the results of the automatic system. So we kind of encourage you to use this as like kind of safety rails, guardrails, and then if you need to go that next step, then you still have that manual control if you really want.
Yeah.
But again, accessibility is a broad topic, and so if there's anything specific that you want to ask, please come into our community, and we'll be happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for showcasing Skeleton in general. Thank you for Skeleton, because I think it's a
well, thank you. Thank you to everybody. Paulo and I just got back from the Svelte Summit. It was very exciting to it was my first time to meet a lot of folks in the community firsthand, in person. And part of that was there was just people that are Svelte users that are there, including some Skeleton fans. And it was very interesting to go and like meet these folks and say, hear how they're using Skeleton in a very practical way in their application. And if you kind of remember what I was saying earlier, like this started as a little small project just for a couple things that we were working at an old company a couple years ago, and to see that like broad jump from here's where we started, very humble starts to such a broad audience, it's been just mind blowing. It's been super exciting. So thank you to everybody that's using Skeleton And again, we're always open if there's something we can improve or make better. That's always on the forefront of our mind. So let us know.
Yeah, again, thanks for coming, and thanks everybody for joining the stream. I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed this week in Svelte, and I'll see you next week. Bye.